The Housing Federation says homes in England are a bigger threat to climate than cars because they produce more carbon emissions than all of the country's vehicles. It claims there are 25 million properties producing 58.5 million tonnes of carbon dioxide every year, compared to 27 million cars emitting 56 million tonnes. Poor insulation, gas central heating systems, they are the things commonly blamed for heat loss in homes. The chief executive says for too long the impact of housing on climate change has been overlooked. While we've become more conscious of the vehicles we drive, the amount we recycle and what we eat, these new figures must now force us to recognise the enormous role our drafty homes are having. If we don't start making serious progress on decarbonising and retrofitting our homes, we won't achieve the government's target of net zero by 2050. And yet fewer than 1 in 4 homeowners, according to these figures, are planning to make eco-upgrades to their homes in the next 10 years. To be honest, to me, that doesn't come as a surprise. If I have to spend money and do work on the house, it's not going to be on insulation. Next to coving for the ceiling, there is literally no other worse way of spending your money on insulating your walls, is there? 0345 6060 973. If you have spent money, time, energy and effort greening your home, what have you done to it and what noticeable difference has it actually made? Because while I'm not sceptical about the science, I am rather sceptical about the technology for the home in particular, heat pumps and hydrogen being the prime examples, being worth it right now to invest in. In our house, if you're cold, you stick a jumper on. You know, I'm not paying to insulate the walls, and I'm not particularly keen to put solar panels on the roof unless someone can persuade me it's worth it. And at the moment, whether it's Extinction Rebellion, whether it's the government, nobody seems to be attempting to. 0345 6060 973. 10:07. Tom Burke chairs the E3G climate change think tank, former government advisor on environmental policy. Thank you for coming on the programme. Do you agree that the homes are a bigger carbon emitting problem than cars?
Yes. As we've known for a very long time that the fastest and cheapest way to get our emissions down is to, as it were, do what the Housing Federation is saying, and that's stop the heat leaking out of our leaky buildings. We've known that for a long time, and frankly, government after government has failed to put in place the actually rather straightforward things we need to do in order to make that work. And work for everybody.
What then are some of the very straightforward things that people could do?
Well, the very straightforward thing government could do is not to charge VAT on refurbishing homes, producing exactly the kind of disincentive you were talking about, while letting new homes be created without VAT. So it's a very simple tax cut that the government could do that would actually make a lot of difference to people being incentivized to refurbish a house and to close up all those leaky holes. That's the thing. The second thing it could do is stop stopping and changing policy and come up with a consistent policy. And as we've learned with the vaccinations, if you want something to work really well, then make use of local, like this, everybody's homes in all our communities, make use of local government's ability to connect with people in their daily lives. And don't hire, which the government for its last scheme did, don't hire a bunch of American consultants in to try and do it by remote.
Apparently this research, the National Housing Federation say 60% of homeowners do not think their home energy use has much of an impact on carbon emissions. Do you think the message about greening your home has been lost in and amongst all the stuff about have a shower, don't have a bath, don't wash your plates, do wash your plates, whatever all the other messages are?
It's certainly a much more important message than the kind of those messages you're describing, and the government has not been clear and consistent in its messaging. And as we have seen with COVID, how important it is if you want people to do things that are in all our interest, tremendous willingness of people to do it, but you've got to tap into that by being clear and consistent. And frankly, the government hasn't been clear and consistent on this.
Do you think part of the thing that's putting people off is the cost? You look at some of the boiler stuff, and even though you can get grants, it's still quite expensive to do it. And spending money on insulating your home feels like a waste.
Well, I can't do anything about, or nobody can do anything about what people feel other than be consistently communicating to people the real benefits. Your bills will go down if you take the measures to reduce leak. Your bills will go down as soon as you take those measures, not at some distant point in the future. So you have to do both the policies and the messaging that actually mobilize people to do that. And what's more, we know very well that when people see other people doing something, they tend to do it as well. So there's got to be much better political leadership than we've had in doing this.
I'm going to ask this, Tom, but I'm not meaning it to sound as confrontational as it may come across. But have you done it?
In what sense? I live in a flat. My flat is properly insulated. I don't have, I don't burn any fossil fuels to heat my flat, except for some gas. I haven't changed my gas boiler yet. So no, I haven't done all the things I could do.
And why is
that?
That?
I'm not going to make this a blame game either.
No, I'm not, and I'm not here to blame you at all. You occupy the position that many millions of people also occupy.
But, yeah, exactly.
But why? What is stopping you making those changes? Do you think?
The only change I can think of, I have LED lighting, which is one of the changes I've made in my own life. The only thing I can think of to change, because my building's insulated fully all the way through, but it's a first floor flat, so I can't do my walls, or I can't do my a roof, all those sort of obvious things. I installed a new boiler a few years ago. That was one of the highly eco-rated efficiency boilers, which is the thing I could do. There's not much more I can personally do. But also, the reality of this, as you said yourself, introducing the program, this is not about simply about the individual things we can do. They don't add up to much unless government is doing the things that we can all do together. And that's the really important part of this.
So how can it create the environment that many millions of people can go, it's in my interests to switch my gas boiler to a heat pump?
Well, the first thing it could do on that, and remember, it's not every home, so you can't talk to everybody. An awful lot of people live like me in blocks of flats. We're not going to be talking about heat pumps for those people. But in all those, as it were, owner-occupied homes, the gardens, then the very simplest thing government can do is actually lower the cost of the capital for doing that. In other words, by using the government's ability to borrow money at essentially these days zero interest rates and pass on some of that benefit to consumers, which would be an enormous incentive.
We're talking billions and billions of pounds here to do that.
Oh, no, we're not.
Well,
why do you think,
to get boilers out, we could be looking at billions of pounds. If you want to create a grant for people to replace their gas boilers,
well, I didn't say that. I said you lower the capital cost. So in other words, you loan people the money at the cost the government borrow it, they pay it back. It doesn't cost the nation billions and billions of pounds, just means people have an incentive to do it. If more and more people do that, the cost of that to individual consumers will go down very rapidly. Last week, 2 weeks ago, we were talking about £10,000 a pop in the Times. Today, we're now talking about £8,000 a pop. And Octopus is still saying they can give it to you at £5,000 or £6,000. So I think you've got to be very careful about how much you think this is going to cost.
All right. Well, let's see what I'd be interested to see what my listeners, what it's cost them to do this if they have done it. Let me just ask you finally, I mentioned the idea that from the American Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society about Europe having its hottest year in 2020, and the suggestion that actually the lockdowns in 2020 didn't really have any effect on global greenhouse gas emission levels.
I think that's... Sorry, Tom, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what do you make of that?
Well, I think that's what you would have expected. I mean, really? The COVID thing was an interruption. People stopped traveling. It actually reduced emissions last year by about 7%. But the minute the economy started to recover, the emissions went back up again. So I'm not surprised by that. I am worried by that because it's going in the wrong direction. We need to start driving emissions down. But I'm not sure I'd prescribe a pandemic as a way of solving the climate.
No, that we'd absolutely agree on. Tom, thank you very much indeed. Tom Burke, you're chair of the E3G Climate Change Think Tank, your former government advisor on environmental policy.